The one in this picture is none other than William Bonin, and if you don't know him yet, then you came to the right video. You see, this William guy from these pictures seems just like another middle-aged man, perhaps handsome to some people. Yet under this mask, under this facade, the least I can describe him as is a monster. A plague that snatched at least 44 lives, more than 20 of which were confirmed. A monster just like Dahmer. I am pretty sure that a lot of you know him from the Netflix series made about him. Just like Dahmer, this man targeted only gay men, or even those suspected of being gay. Let me emphasize men, because all of the victims I will talk about were just boys making their first steps in life. I'm talking about 12, 14, and 15-year-olds. His oldest victim was 19 or 20. The only thing that comes to mind when speaking about Bonin is a literal monster that spread faster than wildfire between December 1972 and June 1980, with the first definite victim on May 28, 1979. A calamity masquerading as a Vietnam veteran, a merciful man taking care of the sick. This thing struck Southern California with the most violent deaths one could ever imagine. This man abducted, raped, tortured, and strangled some of his victims. Some showed marks of acid burns on them. To top it all off, he looted the corpses of his victims, and in the end, like he was throwing out trash, he left the bodies in front of dumpsters and in old gas stations without any care in the world. This man even stated after the police caught him that if not for one of his accomplices leaving him, the police would have never found him. As he spoke, he would have been out there killing without stopping. I will definitely not include any of these details in the video, but feel free to check the whole thing in the sources I will include in the description or in the comment section. So without further ado, I am your host Jonah, and this is the full story of the Freeway killer, William Bonin. The first victim, well, the first definite victim was 14-year-old hitchhiker Thomas Lundgren. As I mentioned, Bonin was suspected of killing 44 young men and boys. But after an intensive investigation, homicide investigators were quick to notice different hands at work in several of the murders. It was later agreed that 21 of the killings were almost definitely connected, with the first being the demise of Thomas. In his van of death, Bonin continued cruising around LA, setting his sights on his soon-to-be second victim, 17-year-old Mark Shelton, who was reported missing from Westminster on August 4th. One after another, bodies were discovered all over California. From Agoura, where they found the bodies of both 17-year-old Marcus Grabbs and 15-year-old Donald Hayden, to Ventura, where police discovered the body of 17-year-old David Murillo, and finally to the remains of Robert Warostek waiting on Interstate 10 between Banning and Palm Springs. Unfortunately, the killings didn't stop. The police would soon discover a John Doe in Kern County on November 30th, followed by the murder of 18-year-old Frank Fox 2 days later in Long Beach. And the list goes on and on. Many of them Bonin carried out alone, but sometimes he had accomplices, partners sharing the same messed up fantasies Bonin had. Notably, Vernon Robert Butts was arrested as an accomplice in 6 of the Freeway murders. All of them were strangled to death, tortured, and sometimes stabbed. Although it seemed that the Freeway killer, William Bonin, was far from getting caught and that nothing would stop him from killing, the reality says differently. A mistake was bound to happen, leading to the arrest of the monster on June 18, 1980, and that mistake was James Monroe. It seems that I am rushing the story a bit, so how about we set the clock back a little to witness what was fated to happen. June 2, 1980 is the day the cracks started showing. For Bonin, it was a regular day at work with his roommate James Monroe. After the day ended, Bonin and James got into the van and were on their way home. At this point, it really seemed like nothing would happen, but Bonin's eyes saw something else. Those demon eyes spotted a hitchhiker on the side of the road trying to get home. So Bonin did what he did best. He stopped and picked up said hitchhiker named Stephen Wells. After some chit-chat with Stephen, the direction changed from his home to Bonin's. After a question from Bonin wondering what Stephen thought of gays, he answered, "Oh, they're okay because I'm bisexual." This reply was enough for Bonin to stop and get in the back of the van, where he started orally copulating him. The whole thing evolved, ending up with them having sex at Bonin's house. While this happened, James was the one driving. After he dropped them off at the house, he went back to pick up some things from the store. However, his quick visit to the store was unfruitful because he was stopped by a police officer for driving the van without a license. James returned and told Bonin what happened, which he seemed unfazed by as he continued having sex with Stephen while James watched TV. Sometime after Bonin left the room with James, he continued and convinced Stephen to let him tie him up in exchange for a promise of receiving $200. He claimed to know a guy who liked to do things to tied-up men and would pay cash for that. During this, James was suspicious that Bonin was up to something. He even tried to talk Bonin out of killing the man, to which Bonin replied, "Hey, it's too late. I already got him tied up, so I'm gonna kill him." And kill him he did. Bonin returned to the room where Stephen was lying on the bed, and after beating Stephen, he ordered James to give him Stephen's shirt and strangled the poor man with it. Throughout all this, James was panicking, not knowing what to do but listening to Bonin's orders in fear that he would be next. After Bonin killed his would-be 20th victim, he put the corpse in his van and covered it with a tarp to dump later. He then proceeded to calm down James, saying, "Hey, relax, you didn't do anything wrong. I'll take the blame if we get caught. Okay, relax." Confessing to James that he was the Freeway killer and had partners, Bonin put a lot of effort into reassuring James that he wouldn't hurt him unless he ran away or called the police. He even introduced him to Vernon Butts as their new partner, and went as far as tying James up as he had done with Stephen, only to let him go, all to assure James that he wouldn't kill him. However, this did not change James's mind. He continued to play along with Bonin until he got his golden chance and fled to Michigan, maintaining a low profile until June 13, 1980. This was indeed the right thing to do because obviously, Bonin was planning on getting rid of him when the right time came. Now the question is, how was James Bonin's fatal mistake? Because James did not call the police. He was too scared. The answer lies in anger. After James fled, Bonin was furious to the point of letting his guard down, and that's exactly what the police wanted. Yes, Bonin had the police running in circles for some time, but what he didn't account for was that they were already on his back, all thanks to William Pugh, a car thief police busted in May 1980, who turned out to be much more than that. In fact, he was a witness to one of Bonin's killings. Specifically, he had been along for the ride when Bonin killed Harry Turner. Fear not, William became the police's golden ticket in capturing the Freeway killer, as he didn't hesitate at all in spilling everything in an attempt to save his own skin. He would eventually serve 6 years for voluntary manslaughter as part of a plea deal made with the police, and with that, surveillance on Bonin began. 9 days after Wells' murder, enraged by James's escape, Bonin began looking for a new victim. Unbeknownst to him, police officers were on his tail. He tried to pick up 5 different young men, finally succeeding with a 15-year-old boy. Bonin then drove to a deserted beach parking lot, and by the time police approached the van, they were met with the sight of Bonin in the process of sodomizing the teenager. Evidence was scattered all over the place, including tape and rope similar to that which bound his victims, as well as his scrapbook of Freeway killer stories. Thus, the legend of the Freeway killer came to an end, and William Bonin was arrested. Not long after his arrest, the police quickly apprehended Butts. As for Monroe, he was arrested by Michigan State Police a month later, locking all members of the Freeway killer team behind bars. Bonin showed no signs of regret or remorse for what he had done. He told a reporter, "I'd still be killing. I couldn't stop killing. It got easier each time." In fact, he was just embarrassed that he got caught. Oddly enough, once confronted with the evidence, he didn't deny anything and confessed in a relaxed voice to killing 21 boys, stating to some reporters, "If Monroe would have stayed with me, they would have never got me. And yes, I would have killed Monroe, but in my time." He even shared with the police detailed aspects of each crime he committed, sounding like someone discussing a movie he liked very much with friends. The trial of the notorious Freeway killer was swift and decisive. Despite Bonin's attempts to shift blame onto his accomplice Butts, the prosecution effortlessly dismantled his defense. The jury wasted little time in condemning William Bonin to death for his heinous crimes. However, Bonin refused to accept his fate quietly. He exploited every legal avenue available, launching appeal after appeal. When conventional methods failed, he attempted to barter information about unsolved murders, but authorities deemed his knowledge insufficient to spare his life. Nearly 2 decades passed before the U.S. Supreme Court intervened, instructing lower federal courts to cease granting stays unless directly ordered by the highest court in the land. At last, Bonin's execution date was set in stone. In 1996, Bonin's reign of terror officially ended as he met his fate at San Quentin. Meanwhile, his accomplice Monroe continues to serve his sentence, yearning for understanding from the outside world. In a tragic twist, Vernon Butts, who had initially claimed to be under Bonin's hypnotic influence, took his own life on January 11th. After 4 unsuccessful attempts since his arrest, Butts finally succeeded in hanging himself in his cell. And with that, we conclude our case for today. Stay safe and see you soon.